Those blue air shocks that I recommend in the video, I've had some people go ahead and order them, but they've had some difficulty mounting them at the top. At the bottom it's no problem, but at the top the hardware just doesn't seem to fit. So I'm going to do a quick video here on one way you can mount them with some pretty simple hardware. First thing we should look at is the shocks that come with it and why they are the way they are. At the bottom there's this little swivel ball, and since the Barrage is made up of a mixed bag, a dog's breakfast of parts from all kinds of different crawlers and different machines. This is an M2 hole down here, not an M3. Just about everything else on this crawler and every other crawler on the planet has M3 hardware, but that's an M2. So the shocks that the blue air shocks come with an M2 hole at the top and the bottom. So at the bottom it's no problem. The existing hardware just slips right through the bottom of the blue air shock, but at the top we have a different situation because on the Barrage this huge hole here is meant to slip right over, click over this little ball here, which screws onto the shock tower. So if we remove that and we remove the shock, all we're left with, as you can see here, is a shock tower with a bunch of gaping holes in it. And if you look at the top of the blue air shock, it has a very small M2 hole, as you can see here. Okay, that's an M2. So what I've done is, luckily I had these very long M2 bolts that I just simply put through there like that, and I'm off to the races. Except for one thing, is that the holes that are drilled into the shock tower themselves are the holes that are molded into the shock tower themselves, so they're a little sloppy. Now if you don't mind it being a little sloppy, that's fine. You just put a nut on the other end, you tighten it up. Now I wanted mine to be a little more precise than that, so I found a small piece of brass tubing that I cut to size, and I slipped it in there, and it's M2, so the brass tubing happens to be M3 on the outside, M2 on the inside, so this little sleeve or this bushing made a perfect fit for my hardware to go through. Now not everybody's going to have that hardware, so here's what I recommend doing. Is find yourself an M2 bolt, and they're not that hard to find. And an M2 is going to fit just beautifully through the top hole of that air shock there. Now the problem is, when you go to put it in there, first of all it's going to be a little sloppy because that hole is too big, but a little slop isn't going to hurt you at the end of the day if you put a nut on the other end. Now that presupposes that you have an M2 nut, and those are pretty hard to find. The other thing that's hard to find is an M2 screw that's long enough to go through there so that you can put a nut on the other side to begin with. So what I recommend is you get a drill, get your power drill, and you take a 1/16 drill, and you find a spot on the shock tower. You can go right below, there's even a little indentation there, or you can go slightly off to the side. And you just drill a brand new hole right next to it. And then what you can do is you can take that M2 screw and you can self-tap it right into that hole that you just drilled. And you're done. Naturally, you have to go through the same mounting routine for all four corners. It's not hard, shouldn't take you long. Don't be afraid to drill different locations in the shock towers and see if you can find the one that works best for you. One drawback to these air shocks is that they have no adjustments that you can make once they're mounted onto the chassis, and at rest they sit at basically their full extension. And I like to run my rigs with a little more droop than that. So they come with about 1/8 of an inch droop, and I like to run about 1/2 inch. And the way I did that was pretty simple. Now, these shocks come with 2 springs. They come with a soft spring, and they come with a stiffer spring. Personally, I couldn't tell the difference with my fingers or even mounting them on the truck. The reason I mentioned that you've got 2 sets of springs is that it allows you to play around with one set of them. And so what we're going to do is we're going to take a 9mm wrench and we're going to unscrew the top cap. We don't even have to take these guys off of the rig to do that. We're just going to loosen this top shock cap here, and we're going to unscrew that with our fingers. And that allows the shock to completely come apart. And then we can reach in with some sort of tool and we can take out the spring. So there's the spring that it comes with, and this is what I did. I just cut off a little bit off the end with nippers, took off about 1/4 inch. Then simply drop that back down inside, just like that. And then screw the cap back on. Get it finger tight. Put the 9mm wrench on it. Snug that up, just like that. And there you go. Now instead of having just that much droop, you've got that much droop. Naturally, you have to do the same modification to all 4 shocks to get the rig to sit level. And it seems to me that you should put the cut end of the spring facing downward so that the plunger has a square surface to push against. When you put the body back on, you see that the body sits a little bit lower on the rig, a little bit more realistic, a little bit more scale, and the rig will not perform as well at high speed over bumps. This is a crawler and it's meant to go slow, and I think you'll be impressed with the improvement in how it does over rocks and sticks and things like that.